Welcome to this Health Matters segment. Hi, my name is Leah Groppo, and I'm a clinical dietitian at Stanford Healthcare. In my clinical practice, I have patients that come to me all the time, and they want to ask me and ask my opinion around different fad diets. And so I wanted to take this time today to go over my personal perspective on those diets. So people will come into the clinic after maybe scrolling through social media or maybe talking to family and friends, and really will come up with this diet and they want to run it by me. So maybe diets that promise a youthful look, or diets that promise lower blood sugar or lower blood pressure. So they're all different varieties of things that people are desiring, and so they always want to run it by me. So today we're going to talk about 4 different diets that I get asked about most often. So the Mediterranean diet, intermittent fasting, the Paleolithic diet, and the ketogenic diet. So those 4 are the ones that we're going to discuss. And then finally, I really want to share with you my favorite diet recommendations when I work with my personal clients at Stanford Healthcare. The first diet that we're going to talk about is the Mediterranean diet. So this diet is really rich in unprocessed foods. It really stresses the eating of local foods, getting in lots of colors, and actually really focusing on getting a lot of plant-based foods into your diet. So when you look down at your plate, you want to see more plants than you see animal proteins or dairy, so more plant-based foods. So when we think about the Mediterranean diet, it's been something that's very popular, especially in the last couple years. It was one of the top diets last year. And so I think a lot of people are really familiar with the Mediterranean diet, but it's kind of hard to really think about what the origin of the diet is. So I always like to first think about, where did we come up with this diet and how did it come to the US? So the Mediterranean diet really originated because researchers found that people who lived near the Mediterranean Sea had a lot lower rates of cardiovascular disease. So of course, a lot of researchers ran over to the Mediterranean and they wanted to really understand maybe why this was happening versus other Western countries. And so what they found when they researched them is they really did indeed have a lower risk of cardiovascular disease. And when they really looked at that, that was based on the people who were eating the colorful, non-starchy veggies, the produce, cooking with their families, eating more plant-based foods, less processed, less packaged foods. So that's the population that we're really looking at. So when we're thinking about the Mediterranean diet, we're not thinking maybe about a package that says Mediterranean diet friendly. We're really thinking about getting back into our kitchens. We're thinking about including our family, maybe our friends, getting those raw ingredients like the ones I have around me, preparing them as a family and consuming them and enjoying them. A thing that I really want to point out about the Mediterranean diet is that not everybody in the Mediterranean eats this one way, right? So if we were to go travel maybe to Italy, or if we were to travel to Greece, it doesn't mean that all of a sudden now we're going to have all these heart protective foods. What it does mean is that the cultural choices within that region tends to be more heart healthy. So we don't want to just think about packaged foods that say Mediterranean. We want to think about how can we sort of adopt some of these Mediterranean principles. So next up, we're going to talk about intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting. This is a huge new buzzword. And so I guess arguably we could say this isn't necessarily a diet. It doesn't know what food specifically to eat, but it really does know 2 different things. So there's calorie-restricted intermittent fasting, and then there's also time-restricted intermittent fasting. I think time-restricted intermittent fasting, so really thinking about the time that you eat. So thinking about the 8-16 diet. So for 8 hours in the day, you get to eat. You can eat whatever you want. For 16 hours, we don't eat any food. So you just have water, for example. You can have non-calorie tea, non-calorie beverages. But really, that's kind of the definition of the 8-16. When we're also looking at this diet, the calorie-restricted diet is the 5-2 diet that's also become really popular. So for 5 days out of the week, you eat fairly normally, and for 2 days out of the week, you eat hypocaloric. So hypocaloric really means low calorie. So it's almost telling your body that you're fasting for those 2 days, even though you're not really. So for the hypocaloric days, we're looking around like 500 to 600 calories in your entire day, so your entire 24-hour period. And of those calories, typically they're more non-starchy vegetables, produce, things that are not processed carbs, not super high-fat, high-protein foods, but more plant-based foods in those days. So it can be a hard diet to follow because those 2 days out of the week can be a little bit harder to do. So those are the two main. And then there's one that almost blends both of them that has also been researched a lot, called the alternate day fast. So for 24 hours, you can eat more normally. And for 24 hours, you're not consuming any caloric types of foods. So this one I would say is the least popular, at least with my patients, because it's the most challenging to sort of bring out and to do. I would say that the people that I'm working with typically prefer to try the 8-16 diet. And so when we're looking at that, it's really the question you have to ask yourself is this in my eating window or is this outside of my eating window? It's not a question of, does this food fit into my diet? Is this something that is on the list? It's more like a timing of a window thing. So I think that a lot of people find that to be really helpful. And when we're thinking about the benefits of intermittent fasting, we can really kind of start to understand that intermittent fasting can help reduce insulin resistance. So when the body is not always getting fuel and food and fuel and food throughout the entire day, and it has the time to kind of fast, insulin levels lower, and the body is more prepared the next day to meet the needs of the diet. So for those 8 hours. So that's something that can really have a benefit for our cardiovascular disease as well as our blood sugar. And I really like that all the diets that I'm really thinking about today actually are coming with some body of research. So we have some research studies, researchers are looking into them and kind of seeing in a clinical way where the benefits can be. When we're thinking about the longevity of being able to make these changes, I do think that in the research, when the researchers look at people for a longer period of time, not just those 3 months or 6 months, but the year-long studies and follow up with them, people tend to be more able to continue with intermittent fasting to the 12-month mark. Versus other diets, people can go really a lot and make big changes for 3 months, but by that 12-month check-in, things have really changed and gone back to how they were before. The next diet that we're going to talk about is the Paleolithic diet, or Paleo diet, as a lot of people refer to it as. So when I think about the paleo diet, the premise is that we want to eat like a caveman used to eat, or in my case, I guess it would be like a cave woman. And so there are a couple of flaws to this thought process, because when we think about a lot of branded foods that have paleo diet approved on it, they're paleo brownies or paleo cookies or paleo chips. And so I'm pretty sure if we went back in time and we showed those people living in the Paleolithic time our paleo brownies, they may enjoy them, but it may also be confusing. But when we think about the Paleolithic diet, I really think that we can kind of glean some really important things. So what are we thinking about eating? Unprocessed foods. So we want to eat the foods as close to Mother Nature made them as possible. In the Paleolithic time, they didn't have big mills to make a lot of flour. They didn't have a lot of food processing. They didn't have ovens. So really trying to eat food as close to Mother Nature made it as possible, I think is a really important thing to focus on. Eating a lot of bright, colorful fruits and vegetables is also something that can really be focused on. I think that one of the kind of the deep things that people kind of fall into when they're starting the paleo diet is that they just think lots and lots of meat. So the Paleolithic time, they just ate lots of red meat or different meats, and so that's what they go for first. But I would say in the Paleolithic time, we want to think about veggies, produce, fruits, vegetables first before we think about meat. Think about in that time, you'd have to go actually catch catch what you were planning on eating and hunt it down before you got to consume it. So really this diet is actually a lot lower in meats and lower in processed oils and fats. We want to think about unprocessed foods, more plant-based foods than animal products, cooking more foods at home, making foods from scratch as much as possible. And then a big thing for blood pressure control is not adding extra salt to all the foods that you consume. So if you're doing the paleo diet, you want to think about that salt shaker. You want to put it off to the side, maybe put it in your wastebasket, something like that, to really kind of follow this diet. As we're researching this diet more and more, when people follow more of an unprocessed food diet, so paleo, unprocessed foods, plant-based foods, we really do see heart protective health, health in blood sugar, and also hypertension or blood pressure control, because taking away a lot of that added salt. So the next diet that we're going to talk about is the ketogenic diet, or as most people like to call it, the keto diet. So this diet is something that's become really popular in the last maybe 5+ years. The keto diet is a really, really high-fat diet, so maybe 60 to 70, even up to 80% of your calories are coming from high-fat sources, a moderate protein diet, and a very low-carb diet. So when we're talking about low-carb, we're not talking about a moderate low-carb, maybe like 130 to 150 grams of carbohydrate. We're talking about a severely depleted low-carb diet, so closer to maybe 20 to 40 to 50 grams max per day, including fiber grams. So not looking at net carbs, looking at total carbohydrates. So this is a very low carbohydrate diet. And so when we think about why also low protein, I get this question a lot. It's because when we eat high amounts of protein, our body can take amino acids, which are the building blocks of protein, break them down, and actually through a pathway create glucose. So our body really likes to be able to make glucose. So if we have excess protein and we have no carbohydrate sources, our body can do gluconeogenesis, which is the process of converting amino acids into carbohydrates in our body. So to do a true keto diet, you have to have really high fat, moderate protein, very low carbohydrates. So what else is kind of involved in this diet? So this diet specifically doesn't really say what are the best sources of healthy fats. It just says high fat. So a lot of people can maybe show you that they're eating the bacon diet, they're adding butter to their coffee, all these things that we do know from long-term history can raise blood lipids. And so we kind of want to be thinking about that as well. And also when we're looking at research around this diet, I really, really like that now when we're thinking about these kind of fad diets, we're doing research for 12 months. So we're not just looking at these diets in a 12-week period, we're looking at them in a longer period. Because when I'm working with my clients, I really want to empower them to make a lifestyle change, because type 2 diabetes, when you're diagnosed with it, it doesn't go away. So say you do a diet for 12 weeks, and over those 12 weeks, your numbers lower and you can get off medication. And then you say, great, I'm done, no more, I can go back to how I was before. That's just not how the body works. So all these lifestyle changes have to be things that we can implement and carry forward for the rest of our life. So when we're thinking about this very high-fat diet, moderate protein, low carb, it can be really hard to maybe eat with others. It can be hard to eat out. We really need to be thinking about the macronutrients. When we're really looking at evidence-based and research-oriented diets, because of course at Stanford Healthcare, we always focus on looking at the research, not just thinking about maybe I had this one patient and they did really well on this diet, N of 1. That's not a research study. So looking at these research studies, what do they tell us? And what they tell us is patients who are on maybe a Mediterranean diet, intermittent fasting diet, and a keto diet, the keto diet patients are going to lose more weight faster in the beginning. And then if you check in with them after 12 months, they tend to actually gain some weight back, and they're normally not on that diet anymore because it's such a restrictive diet and really everything needs to change. So you just have to think about, is that something that fits into my life, as with all of these diets? And I do want to point out, it's not that I'm recommending any of these diets, but I really want you to get the perspective of where is the evidence and the research, and then what are the things we can glean from these different diets. I do also think that it's an important diet to work and let your healthcare team know that you're going to start the keto diet so you can get your lipids or your cholesterol drawn before the diet and then maybe 3 to 6 months into the diet. Because we do see a lot of patients, their cholesterol will increase, so it's something that we want to be mindful because we never want to embark on a diet and have worse health outcomes than when we started. We eat in unique environments. We eat with different people, maybe our family, maybe our roommates, our friends. So there's all these different things that are going into our food choices. So sometimes taking this diet maybe off the shelf, like the keto diet, it just might not fit into our lifestyle. I really hate to hear when people say, oh, I only have to cook a separate meal for myself versus my family. I feel like when things get too challenging and there are so many steps that they're just things that aren't sustainable. So when I'm talking about my final recommendation, I really want you all to think about, what is your eating environment? What are your health goals? Do you want to maybe lose weight, improve blood sugar, improve blood pressure, maybe thinking about your cardiovascular markers, your cholesterol, or maybe it's just overall healthy immunity boosting foods or whatever that may be. So I want you to think about that and ask yourself, what do you want to get out of your diet? And then where are places in your day that are sort of not meeting your goals? So is that a specific hour? Is that a specific meal or maybe a snack, for example? And I want you, once you've dialed into that, think about how can you make a lifestyle goal around that? So for example, maybe at 3 to 4 p.m., I'm always reaching for, say, the bag of chips. So a processed food. So thinking about me wanting to change that aspect, for example, maybe I can think about prepping veggies for my 3 to 4 p.m. snack, or maybe reflecting on myself. Am I really hungry at 3 or 4 p.m.? Or is that when I'm just used to taking a snack break with my kids and my family? So really thinking through, are we eating for hunger, or are we maybe eating by habitual sort of processes? So really kind of dialing in and understanding for you what that looks like. And then making a goal. So we want to think about making a SMART goal. So something that's really subjective, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. Something that we can really sort of evaluate, maybe give it 4 weeks, set a goal, and then think about, after 4 weeks, were we able to achieve that goal? And so for an example, if we take my 3 to 4 p.m. snack idea, say on Sunday night, I'm going to prepare my vegetables, and instead of eating my bag of chips on Monday through Friday, I'm now going to reach for my veggies. So that could be a SMART goal. And then Saturday, Sunday, I have no goal around that because it's hard to do things 7 days a week. So if that makes sense, really breaking things up, isolating where that time you want to make a change and providing a healthy substitution, or maybe omitting the snack if you're not truly hungry is really what I'm thinking about. And where this isn't really a diet, for example, this is really kind of the way that evidence really shows helps benefit people in the long run. So when we do research around this is looking at people maybe 3 to even decades later when they create these SMART goals and really evaluate their health and move forward. They have these sustainable goals because they really think about how does it fit in with their life and their family's life and just their work style and everything, because they're the experts in their life. To recap, we talked about the Mediterranean diet, intermittent fasting, the Paleolithic diet, and the ketogenic diet today. So kind of recapping and thinking about what can we glean from each diet. The Mediterranean diet, really focusing on local foods, unprocessed foods, maybe involving other family members in cooking and their overall experience of eating. With intermittent fasting, thinking about maybe stopping eating after dinner and not eating past those higher calorie snack foods could be something else. Also thinking about with intermittent fasting, maybe exploring our hunger cues and how hungry we are if we're eating when we're hungry or maybe snacking when we're not hungry. The Paleolithic diet, thinking about more plant-based foods, less meat, less processed foods could be something we could glean from that diet. And finally, the ketogenic diet. So maybe exploring how many processed carbohydrates we eat in our day could be another option with that. Not that we're maybe going to jump into that diet completely, but thinking about things to explore. And then finally, I would say thinking about lifestyle choices. So really giving that a shot, exploring in yourself. What does your environment look like? Maybe what changes do you want to make? What do you really want to get out of your nutrition? And asking yourself those questions and seeing what those answers might be, and maybe making a goal around that and evaluate in a month and see how your lifestyle changes, maybe your energy changes, your goals change. So that's something I also definitely would want to challenge you with. And then finally, just being able to critically evaluate these diets that are always bombarding us. I feel like so many people want to show us these diets and say, this is the one diet. Next year, there's going to be a new diet. But I want you to be able to critically evaluate and think about where's the evidence and what is this diet going to give me? And maybe it's not going to give you anything. So maybe it's a diet you want to pass on. And then really kind of leaning on your health experts, your nutrition experts. Stanford Healthcare has 50 dietitians, and we all specialize in different areas. And so we're all really here to help keep you healthy when you come into the hospital and to also help keep you healthy when you're at home with your family. And so we're definitely here as a resource, and we're constantly reading the evidence-based studies so that you don't have to be able to sort of translate that into your own life. So you're definitely the expert in your own life, but we can be the nutrition experts to help you. So we really appreciate you taking the time to listen to this and kind of get the nutrition, the clinical dietitian's perspective on some of these hot fad diets.